Reckon there's a guy in these bushes. I was right. Nah, bro, I'm getting reported for that. I'm getting reported for that. Alright, now I haven't made an updated bingo video in a long time, and as I'm starting to get back into Hunstmen, I felt like it was time to provide an update. As there has been some new mods and some balance changes that have happened recently since the Lunar Oracle update. Now, some of the changes are pretty significant, especially more towards PvP. The PVE build hasn't changed too much, and I think we'll start off with that, as I think the majority of the player base nowadays is PvE focused. So to start off with, we have the old trusty bingo, and of course we're running the rapid style blueprint. Double weak spot, stock standard, it's pretty much all you need. The mod on that running, of course, the vulnerability amplifier. This is going to give us our weak spot weapon damage, and again, vulnerability gives us more damage, which is always nice to have. Now, for PvE on the attributes here, on the substats, before I forget, the other substats you want to look out for is plus damage to elite enemies or plus damage to great ones. So the, I guess, best in slot attribute role for a mod for PvE would be weak spot damage, weapon damage, great one damage, and then elite or normal enemy damage. You definitely want to probably focus great one damage, especially if you're doing layer runs or boss runs, and then elite damage for, last bosses in silos or something like that. This is what I would recommend focusing on for PvE. Now, to clarify here, my mods are in no way best in slot. I'm just giving them as an example of, what you should run and what you should aim towards, because, I'm almost 1,000 hours deep in this game, and I still have not got best in slot mods, not even close. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's actually impossible to get quad legendary. I think I might have seen one quad legendary since launch. It is basically a non-existent thing. Now, triple legendary, that's a little bit more reasonable, but I would just try and aim for double legendary with purple and then a green or a blue, which is actually doable. So I would aim for legendary weak spot, legendary weapon damage, and then purple great one damage, and then a blue or green normal or elite enemy damage is what I would go for. So again, this is just a foundation of the build. Again, my mods are in no way best in slot. Going on to the WILDFIRE here, again, this is where a little bit of personal preference comes in. I run the precision style calibration blueprint. Now, some people might prefer running rapid style. That is completely up to you. I recommend trying both. If you prefer more damage per bullet, I recommend precision style. And if you prefer high fire rate but less damage per bullet, then you would want to go with the rapid style. Of course, double weak spot. Now, we're not talking about crit in this build. I don't do crit builds with the bingo. I've always been a full weak spot. Now, for the Doombringer, it's a little bit different, and I do have an updated Doombringer video in the pipeline as well. I want to get a bunch of updated build videos out this week, including a silent Anubis video tomorrow, which should be pretty exciting as well. I've been having a lot of fun experimenting with that weapon and getting a build that I find enjoyable. Anyways, once again, we're running that double weak spot on the mod for the WILDFIRE. Now, I've actually got a PvP mod on here. For PvE, we would also run vulnerability amplifier on the WILDFIRE. Again, just more damage overall, focusing the same attributes there, your weak spot, weapon damage, elite damage, and great one damage. Now, for the melee weapon, you can honestly run whatever you want. You could go the axe for the Fortress Warfare, or you could just go Massive Melee because it looks cool. It doesn't really matter. For calibration, light striker style, I like having the movement speed when I have my melee weapon out. Now, you could lean into a little bit of melee DPS if you wanted to. I don't really see the point, but yeah. Now, for the mod on the melee, this is actually something I've kind of forgotten about in my past videos, is the attribute effects actually apply still overall. So while, for example, I'm using a fast gunner mod on the katana, that doesn't matter, right? That core effect doesn't matter. But it's the attribute effects that do matter, because they still add onto our overall stats, even though it is a melee weapon that is not being used. So again, you want to prioritize the weak spot weapon damage, elite, and great one. Now again, my mods are nowhere slightly best in slot. I've been getting incredibly unlucky. I've been spamming silos and events daily, and have not really gotten any improvements over my last mods, which kind of sucks. I actually now noticed why the PvP mods were showing, is we were on the PvP gear set. So again, I'll scroll back up here, but it's the same thing. Again, vulnerability amplified. Here's a little bit of it. It's still not a great mod, really. But yeah, scrolling down now for the armor. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So I run a one piece before we get into all of the key armor, which you probably already know about. But I run one piece snow land rustic hat, which gives us the movement speed bonus. The main reason why I run this is, again, for the movement speed bonus. I just like being fast in PvE. I do trade off a decent amount of HP because it is a green rarity item, but regardless, I just like being fast, and I would rather compromise a little bit of, you know, HP to, again, just be faster. Now, you can go with whatever one-piece set bonus you want. You could go for a shelter piece, which reduces your rolling stamina. And there are a bunch of other one-piece set bonuses you could go for as well, like status reduction. Wouldn't really want that in PvE. But a lot of other people tend to go for shelter, so they can dodge more. But if you're like me, you like a little bit of movement speed. Now, for the mod on our hat, we're going with the classic Precise Strike, and the same thing applies, right? Weak spot, weapon damage, great one, and elite. This is actually better mod, one of my better mods here. Only one legendary substat, but this is kind of what you want to aim for. Maybe replace that normal enemy damage with great ones would be the ideal scenario. But this is actually one of my better mods. Jumping onto the mask, this is where we get onto our three-piece Renegade set. Now, you can do the armor in any order you want, other than the boots. Of course, the boots are our key armor piece, which a lot of you might know, but if you're new to the build, we will get onto that. So again, Renegade mask, stock standard, it gives us a reload speed bonus, a weak spot damage bonus, and then we get Archer's Focus, which is the more we hit a target, the same target, we get stackable weak spot damage bonuses, and that stacks up to 10 times. Halves when you switch a target. Stock standard. If you played the game for a long time, you probably know about this, but if you're new, it's basically just going to give us a shitload more weak spot damage, right? Jumping onto the gloves. The gloves, I run a one-piece Bastille. Again, other than the boots, which you will get onto next, you can run this in any order you like. I just like to, you know, do it this way. This is the way I earned the pieces of armor. And even then, my stars aren't that high because I've been getting very unlucky with the wish machine, right? So, this one-piece Bastille bonus gives us just 10% more weapon damage when we're above 70% HP. In my opinion, there's no real reason not to run this. It's just more damage for one-piece set bonus. And it's fairly easy to get as well. You can just buy it off the wish machine shop. For the mod on that, actually, I missed the mask mod, didn't I? Sorry about that. So, I run Most Wanted. Of course, if you play Doombringer, you'll run Precise Strike. But for the, Targeted Strike, sorry, not Precise Strike. But for the mask, again, we run Most Wanted. This gives us attack plus 5%. Attack is simply just more damage, which is very good. This mod is pretty crappy as well, actually, but again, prioritizing the weak spot weapon damage and great ones, and then elite. It's actually not a terrible mod for PvE, but it could be a little better for sure. It comes down to, that's the whole thing about mods, and that's something I want to talk about in the separate videos. The whole RNG mod system with controllers really needs to go, and there is news on that actually. They are planning to remove controllers and rework the mod system in April, so it is you know, a few months away, which is pretty exciting. So we can look forward to that, but for now we're stuck with the old same RNG system that if you run out of controllers or you're low on controllers, good luck. That's the best you're gonna get. Anyways, onto the gloves. Again, that one-piece Bastille bonus, just more damage, as I said before. And then, of course, the weak spot damage boost. You know, we're just maxing out our weak spot damage. That's what my PvE and PvP builds are all about because of the next item, which we will talk about. But if you're new to One Human, by the way, weak spot is headshot damage. You can probably indicate that by the icon or figure out if you played the game for a little bit. But yeah, I probably do want to add some notes in here if you're a new player as well. But this is more for experienced players. You can definitely check out one of my older videos if you're a new player, as it might be a little bit more approachable. I will discuss some fundamentals here, especially with the next armor piece. So again, weak spot damage boost, just straight up 25% increased weak spot damage, right? Can't go wrong there. Weapon damage, and then again, you want to aim for the great ones and elite enemies preferably. This is a pretty mid PvE mod as well. I've got a green great ones there, which is not bad, but again, my mods are not even slightly best in slot. It's running a purple weak spot, you know, it's not good. Now, again, this is the most important piece of the entire build, the old Hunstmen boots. This is what is called a key armor piece, or a key armor piece. If you're new to Once Human, you can only have one key armor piece per build. The key armor piece has a build-defining key effect, and the key effect is what we're entirely playing around for the bingo build, and we have since launch. If you know experience with the game, you probably know about it already. When we hit a target, we mark them, and on that marked target, we get a guaranteed weak spot, even if it does not hit the weak spot. So effectively, we get a guaranteed headshot, even if it's not a headshot, which is what makes this build so OP and has been a, you know, it's a classic build at this point. You can't go wrong with it. It's a fun build, and there are more OP builds now, so like the Silent Anubis, the Surge Crossbow, or the Critical Pulse it's called, and the new Unstable Bomber Glock 17, for example. But yeah, again, you can't go wrong with the bingo. It's a fun build. It's a good build all-rounder, and it's actually needed in some boss fights, believe it or not, because of the way status builds work. There are some bosses that are just straight up immune to status damage. So it's always good, and I highly recommend one of your first builds being bingo, because it does everything well. Yeah, there's not really a piece of content that the bingo doesn't do, which is the best part about it, in my opinion. So for the old Huntsman boots, I have Ruthless Reaper on. This is where it's a little bit going to dive into a few different mods here. So Ruthless Reaper, I run this mod purely for silo spam and the Lunar Oracle event. And what I mean by that is I get tired of reloading during those events. So this is just after 2 kills, refill 100% of your reserves right into your magazine, which makes, you know, mob farming way smoother. Now, I do replace this mod with Slow and Steady. In fact, we can go and check it out here. I do replace this mod with, sorry, Covered Advance, not Slow and Steady, wrong mod. So I replace this mod with Covered Advance when it comes to a more focused PvE aspect, such as a boss or event boss like Minibus. That's where I would put Covered Advance on. This simply gives us plus 20% more damage if we haven't taken damage within 30 seconds. If you know how to play around this mod, you can basically always have permanent uptime on that damage effect, which is pretty nice. And again, for the attribute effects on that, you know, weak spot, weapon damage, great ones, elite ones, same as. And then we jump onto the last 2 pieces of armor here. We're running simply the Renegade Jacket and the Renegade Pants to top off that 3-piece set bonus that we had with our Renegade Mask. And again, other than the boots, because you can only get this key effect on the boots as a 1 of 1, you can have this armor in any order you like, in any order of acquisition. So you could have the Snowland Rustic Mask, and then you could have the Bastille Hat, and you could have Renegade Gloves, right? You can do it in any order you want other than the boots. And jumping onto the jacket here, I'm running Resist Advantage. This makes us just very tanky. Same thing for PvP, but in PvE it's also really nice to have. And when you get the right attribute effects, it is far stronger than running a blue mod. Now, I always used to say, and this is one of the big changes here, is run a blue mod. Now, that stance has changed, since if you get a good PvE roll with a weak spot, weapon damage, great ones, and elite ones, it is going to be far stronger than that blue damage mod, right? Now, this does rely on you getting a good roll. For example, I have a purple normal enemies here, which makes this a better mod than a blue mod for, you know, mob farming, you know, silos and that. But for great ones, I would actually get more out of using my blue mod because I don't have a mod as good yet. But if you had a good mod with good attributes, like legendary weak spot, legendary weapon damage, and great ones, it would perform better than that blue. Jumping onto the pants here, the Renegade Pants, of course, the Unstoppable Precision. Now, there's another side note on this one as well. Unstoppable Precision is going to be really good for great ones, really good for silos that have a lot of distance. So, for example, Forsaken Giant, where you're quite far away from the boss, I would recommend this mod as you're going to get more out of it, right? And again, same attribute effects. But the note here is that you could, if you're playing a lot closer, or actually if you are, you would get a lot more out of running 3 strikes, again, if you're playing closer. 3 strikes is after 3 hits after not reloading, not exceeding 50% in the magazine. Now, generally speaking, you might have 5 or 6 bullets in your magazine, depending on your substats. I only have 5 bullets because I don't have any mag expansion attributes, and I don't really want them for this build either. I basically get 2 shots that give me a weak spot damage bonus of plus 50%, which is really good for bosses or silos where you're playing closer. So for example, Trent, where you're barrel stuffing, which you might have seen at the start of the video, is where you're going to get more out of this mod than you would with Unstoppable, right? Because you're not playing near as much distance. But if you're doing something like Minibus, the boss, right, in the overworld, then you might get more out of running Unstoppable because there's a lot of distance between you and the Minibus. And that is why I would generally switch between both mods and use gear sets, right? If you're new to Once Human, or if you're experienced, you might already know about this, but there are gear sets, which is a really good feature to utilize. You can instantly swap between gear sets. And we're about to jump onto the PvP set here, but we'll quickly jump over the Cradle. But there is a quick note with the Cradle. The Cradle is always changing, which makes it very hard to make videos on. So, for example, the hard mode servers, the novice servers, the Way of Winter servers, and the Prism, and now the new MaleOreo servers all have different Cradle effects, which makes it very, very hard to make videos on because, again, they're always changing. But there is generally always one rule to follow, and it's just read it, right? Like, generally speaking, if it sounds like it works with the weapon, it probably does. If it says it has plus sniper rifle damage, if it says it's increased damage against the bullseye target, which the bingo does, if it says it's more attack against the, marked target, then it's probably going to work with your weapon, right? And there's the general rule to follow with Cradles going into the future. Instead of referencing a video, because it's always going to be changing, I assume when we enter the new MaleOreo phase in early March that it will be an entirely different Cradle as well. So I highly recommend just reading through the Cradles each season and simply going with your gut. What sounds good probably is good. So there's something to take into consideration. And generally speaking, there's always going to be one general buff for the rifle and one general buff for the pistol. And usually Steady Hand, Mark Strike, and Bounty Hunter are always in the Cradles as well, except they have different effects or descriptions of what they do. For example, Bounty Hunter is different on MaleOreo than it is on Novice. I have no idea why. I couldn't give you a solid explanation for that, but either way, it's good to put it on because either way, it buffs your damage, right? That is the PVE build. That was a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be, and the PvP build is a lot more straightforward for the most part. So, again, jumping onto the PvP build here. We've got the classic bingo, the classic rapid style with, your bolt cancelling, which still is a thing, by the way. I think it's good the bolt cancel is a thing, because there's much more pressing matters in PvP balance, such as that critical pulse bow, which is, a bit concerning for PvP. But again, double weak spot, and then jumping onto the Wildfire, running the precision style or rapid style. Again, personal preference, that's fully up to you. And we will jump onto accessories later. I actually almost forgot about that. They'll probably be in its own section. Running the Hunter's perk, which is the on the Wildfire here, running Hunter's perk, which is basically a defensive mod we use on our Wildfire. So basically, if we initiate a player in PvP with Wildfire first, marking them, we proc the marked enemy's damage versus metas minus 20%. What this means is that you will receive 20% less damage from the enemy that's shooting you. So it only applies to that one target. You would have to reapply it to each target after that with the Wildfire. But what we do is we mark them with our Wildfire, we apply that buff, or debuff to the enemy rather, and then we switch to our bingo, and because that target is marked, we get a guaranteed crit, or weak spot, sorry, a guaranteed weak spot, which gives us our effectively one tap. Now, builds can get quite tanky these days. Generally speaking, bingo is a 2-tap now, especially if someone is built correctly with a lot of defensive, especially weapon damage reduction perks, or using the new shield perk from the Cradle and MaleOreo servers, which we will get onto. I do want to explain that is this one here. Deviant Energy Defense is very strong in PvP, but I'll jump into that later. So, jumping onto the Wildfire here, same thing. Hunter's perk, wait, we already covered that. Kind of a little bit humid here, I'm getting a little bit overwhelmed with myself. Again, Masamune, again, you could run the axe as well if you want Fortress Warfare. And if you're curious, Fortress Warfare is actually a super shield that gives you anti-stagger. So, there are a lot of people, and I actually have an upcoming build video for Fortress Warfare that utilizes the new M4 in a way where you can effectively permanently not get staggered by stagger builds such as Jaws, which makes it very strong. That said, it is on the lower side of DPS, but we'll leave that for that video. Again, running Light Striker and more movement speed, especially in PvP, you might want that as well. On the substat thing as well, It is also important to note that you want to get a good mod on your melee weapon, regardless of core effect, that has good attribute effects. Now, as you can see, mine is not very good. My mods are pretty crap. I got pretty unlucky, as you do in this game. And I also quickly forgot to mention is the attribute effects are completely different for PvP, and that's something I probably should have mentioned, and is actually one of the biggest changes to this build. So before Lunar Oracle, we always went for weak spot, weapon damage, and weapon damage reduction. But after Lunar Oracle, with the introduction of the hazardous Glock 17 and the critical pulse crossbow, which are both status builds and very strong in PvP, you want to build into status damage reduction and health. And what I mean by that is you want an attribute effect that has health and an attribute effect that has a weapon damage reduction. It is possible to roll those 4 stats, so weak spot, weapon damage, status damage, and HP. It is possible to roll that. It is just very hard, and I'm yet to see one. But over the two, I would prioritize health over status damage reduction. The reason why is both status, weapon damage, and health are all 6% legendary upgrades, right? So they all equal 6%. The reason why I recommend focusing health is because it works for both. It's generally just an HP increase, and it's going to help you against both weapon damage builds and status damage builds. And is actually easier to get, from what I've noticed, than status damage and weapon damage reduction. Ultimately, you'd want both. That's best case scenario. Ultimately, you'd at least want 2, so either weapon damage reduction and health or status damage reduction and health. Maybe even a 50-50, so you could have 4 pieces of your gear with status and 4 pieces with weapon damage reduction. That is up to you, and however lucky you get, maybe you just have to use what you get, and a lot of the cases that is, you just have to deal with how lucky or unlucky you got, right? Again, I've got some of my PvE mods in here because, again, I'm very unlucky. So go with my words rather than what I am actually showing you on my own mods. Again, core effect on the melee weapon doesn't matter, right? We're just focusing on getting the good attributes here. So I put on a mod that gives me a little bit more damage and a little bit more HP. Now, my mods are nowhere near ready. So, yeah, there's some pretty crappy ones in here. So now, onto the armor. We're running the classic savior set, which is the 4-piece savior set. Is still basically meta for PvP. And there's no reason not to run it, right? In fact, I'll put this on so it actually highlights everything. So, again, 4-piece savior set. This is going to give us a medicine cooldown reduction. It's going to give us more damage when we're above 70% HP, like the 1-piece Bastille set, except it's a 2-piece set bonus. The 3rd piece of the savior set is going to automatically use an activator when we drop below 30% HP. Very strong. And then the 4th bonus there is going to give us movement speed, weapon damage reduction, and damage increased by 20% for 2 seconds, again, upon being using an activator, sorry, which is very strong. Of course, is the best part of the savior set, what makes it so great, especially alongside the chloro armor, whim, and running stardust regulators. They're going to be very tanky, and we will jump onto consumables later in the video because that deserves its own section because it gets pretty complex nowadays. Now onto the mod. This is the first mod that has changed since before Lunar Oracle. So after Lunar Oracle, we got a bunch of new mods, and one of those mods is Weapon Symphony. Weapon Symphony is going to, after switching weapons, give an increased fire rate and increased weapon damage by 25% instantly, and that decays over by 10% up to 60%. So effectively, every second, that's going to decay by 10%, up to a max of 60%. Which, if you do the maths, you still come out with a little bit of damage. But the reason why this is so good is, if you noted at the start of the video when I said we go from our deagle, we mark them, and we switch to our sniper in one shot, we're going to basically have a majority of that damage, around 20%, 22%, right? So if we mark them with our deagle, insta-swap to our sniper, and hit them, get that weak spot damage, and it is basically going to be effectively, again, a 1-tap or a 2-tap, depending on how tanky they are. And this is going to be way better than running what I think we used to run Precise Strike in PvP. I can't quite remember. I'd have to look at my old spreadsheets and old videos. But this mod, especially when you're insta-swapping a lot in PvP nowadays, is going to be very, very good in my opinion. And that also gives us increased fire rate. So not just a weapon damage bonus, we also get that increased fire rate, which again makes it quite strong. Once again, We're focusing weapon damage, weak spot damage, weapon damage, and then status damage and health is our fourth if we get lucky. Again, I'm nowhere near best in slot. This is the best Weapon Symphony mod I've got so far, and I've been spamming Silo Alpha like crazy. So if you get luckier than me, you know, hopefully you do, but I've been getting not so lucky. Savior Mask, yes, 2-piece Savior set, running Most Wanted. Now, if you want a little bit of crit, I know some people mix in a little bit of crit with Bingo. That's up to you. I know some people run a targeted strike. In my opinion, I just maxing out my damage, and again, attack is just raw damage, right? So there's no reason not to run it, especially if you start off with your Deagle, shoot them a couple times to mark them, switch to your Bingo, boom, that's 3 stacks right there, rounding off, which is, in my opinion, pretty solid, right? There's no real downside to running Most Wanted. Meanwhile, with targeted strike, you're not always going to get a crit, but if you're always marking your enemy, which you generally do with Bingo and Wildfire, then Most Wanted might be best suited for you. This is a mod that I've always run for my PvP set, and again, it's entirely up to you. Again, focusing that weak spot weapon damage, HP and status damage, or weapon damage reduction, depending on how unlucky or lucky you get. Now, our 5th piece of armor here, we again have the 4-piece Bastille set is the best. Sorry, we have the 4-piece Savior set, and the 5th piece here is Bastille 1-piece set. Again, I just do this on the gloves. You can do it in any order you like, other than the boots, which we will get onto next. So again, 1-piece Bastille set bonus is just plus 10% weapon damage, right? There's no real downside not to running this. You know, yeah, you can basically just, again, get more damage out of it. Very good for sniping, obviously, for Bingo. You're generally going to be quite far back a lot of the time, especially if you're engaging, so you always get to choose your fights and start with that damage, right? So again, 1-piece Bastille. Now, you could drop the Bastille for a 1-piece Shelterer if you wanted stam reduction. That's entirely up to you. There is that sort of flexibility there, that preference, if you will. Bastille gloves, on that we run weak spot damage. Now, I know some people run weapon damage. If you're going to weak spot, guarantee with your insta swap on your Bingo, you're going to get a weak spot, so I don't really see any downside not running this. But ultimately, they both come out to pretty much the same amount of damage depending on your attributes. So whether you run munitions amplifier or weapons amplifier, whether you run weapons amplifier or weak spot damage boost, it depends on whatever one you have better attributes on, really. As you can see, I've got a pretty good defensive mod here. I don't really have much good attribute like damage bonuses here. Like, I've got blue weak spot damage, right? But the reason why I'm using this mod is it's got both weapon and status damage reduction, which is actually a pretty good roll. Besides the fact that it doesn't give me as much of a damage boost as some of my other mods, this is a little bit of a trade-off to be a little bit more defensive, especially in the current meta. Of course, jumping onto the boots here, and the old Hunstmen boots, the sort of key to the whole build. Again, we get a weak spot even if it's not a weak spot after marking a target. Again, we mark our target with our Deagle or our Wildfire, switch to our Sniper, hit him in the body, boom, that's, you know, a weak spot hit, which is the best part of the build, right? Arguably the most busted part of the build. This is really the whole thing that makes the build so OP, in my opinion. Wow, actually, considering the current meta, I don't even think Bingo's as strong. I think Bingo's probably ranks 3rd in the current meta compared to the Critical Pulse and the Hazard Glock, which are like 1 and 2 currently. Jumping onto the chest there, save your top. Again, save your pants as well. That's our 3rd and 4th piece for that set there. Again, you can do it in any order you like. You could have the Savior gloves and then the Bastille top. It's up to you, whatever order of acquisition you get them in. Maybe whatever you have higher stars on is the one you use. Jumping onto the boots mods here, if I forgot to mention it, is we're doing Covered Advance. Again, in PvP, you're going to have this up quite a lot. It's generally very easy to have up, especially when you're engaging, you're going to have it up. As a sniper, you usually have the Rite of Fire, because you're usually going to spot the target sooner than someone that's running, for example, the Unstable Bomber Glock, you know, which is quite nice. So this is actually one of my better mods here. This is probably one of my best mods, actually. I've got golden weak spot weapon damage and purple weapon damage reduction. Now, of course, this is very good pre-Lunar Oracle, post-Lunar Oracle. I'd probably want to trade that weapon damage reduction for status damage reduction or HP, but this is one of the best mods I have, and I don't plan to switch it anytime soon. There's other mods I need to improve first. So again, jumping onto the Savior top here and its mod, Resist Advantage. You basically enter fights like a tank. Still one of the best PvP mods for top. There have been a bunch of new mods and some ones that people have been experimenting with, but I still don't think anything really beats Resist Advantage in how tanky you start off your fight with. You know, every time you take a hit, you knock off 10% of that shield, which again, that's still better than a lot of the other mods, right? And especially starting off the fight at, you know, 50% damage reduction, pretty fucking strong. Same attribute effects we're trying to aim for as all of our other mods, you know, weak spot weapon damage reduction, or status damage reduction with health as third or fourth. Again, depends on how lucky you get. Really just aiming for 2 damage and 2 damage reduction or health is the ultimate best in slot mod, if you will, which again is pretty much impossible to get. So minimum just try to aim for 3, which is much more doable. You know, double legendary and 1 purple or blue is the best, is the average of what I've seen so far. Save Your Pants is our last here, and I run 3 strikes. Now, I used to run Unstoppable, but the reason why I switched to 3 strikes is people tend to get a lot more in your face nowadays. So whether they're running Doombringer, the Glock, or the crossbow, people tend to run past you a lot more or dodge past you a lot more, where you are in a lot closer of a vicinity where you're actually going to get more out of 3 strikes. And again, if you're initiating, if you're reloading all the time behind cover, you can actually pretty much have permanent uptime on this mod if you have good aim, especially. So, you know, you eliminate a target, take cover, reload, and then you have that weak spot damage 50% up again, which is the best part of the mod. Especially if you can manage to get a couple magazine capacity increase mods, then you can get to 6 shots, which allows you to have 3 shots with the damage bonus. Is going to be your best bet, right? Now, I don't have that myself, where you actually get 3 shots. I only get 2 shots out of this before I have to reload, since my magazine is only 5 bullets, right? But, you know, you either get lucky or you don't, and that seems to be the general case for mods, as we've mentioned throughout this video here. So, again, onto the attributes here. We've got weak spot damage, weapon damage reduction, or status damage reduction, and health. Again, just focusing the 2 damage. This is one of my worst mods here. As you can see, it's double blue legendary. It's pretty fucking bad. And this is one of the ones that I need to improve, but just don't get lucky with it at all. Even through mod conversion, I just get shafted. You know how it is. Now, for the Cradle in PvP, it's kind of the same rule set as the PVE build. What sounds good probably is good. Now, there is a few exceptions. On Prisonverse servers, I think it is, you have Brawl Boost, I think, which you do want to run. Brawl Boost is actually on the Lunar Oracle servers, but it does something entirely different. It's kind of strange how mods have the same name but do different things depending on the scenario tag. Don't know how I feel about that. I think they need to stick to a more cohesive and more, I guess, matching Cradle, because again, it gets very complicated and it's very annoying to make videos on the Cradle. It's always changing. It changes depending on your scenario, as I've said before. So what sounds good probably is good. So you're going to run Tactical Combo, which is on most scenario tags. You're going to run your pistol one and your sniper one, which you get in the first unlock. Basically just bonus damage. Now, Deviant Energy Defense. This is, I'm pretty sure, exclusive to Lunar Oracle servers, whether that be Prisonverse Lunar Oracle or Evolution's Cool Lunar Oracle. This is a very, very strong mod that's going to give you a fuck ton of weapon damage reduction, right? So summoning or handling Deviations grants a shield equal to 30% of max HP. While the shield is active, weapon damage reduction and status damage reduction plus 10%. So you just basically get you become a tank when your Deviations out, basically. But that's pretty much everything for the Cradle. Again, Bounty Hunter, Mark Strike. If it sounds good, if it reads like it works with Bullseye, you probably want to run it, right? And that's pretty much it. Rapid Aid is pretty good as well. I think that gets a lot of use in PvP nowadays too. Now, Brawl Boost, I shouldn't be running on Lunar Oracle because it does something completely irrelevant on Lunar. But if you're on, I think, normal Prisonverse or normal Evolution's Cool, I think Brawl Boost does something entirely different. So, again, keep that in mind. Now, jumping onto the accessories. For the accessories, we want to max out our accuracy and range. Now, there's a balance here. So pre-Lunar Oracle, I think in the late December update, where they changed a bunch of balance stuff, they added a massive, in fact, I can show this. they added a massive RNG aim cone to the bingo and to snipers in general, which makes like over the shoulder aiming a sniper way less accurate. And it is noticeable. Like, I actually have noticed that it used to be way more accurate pre Lunar Oracle, which was, you know, it was pretty OP, to be honest, being able to over the shoulder aim a sniper from, you know, 150 meters away and have perfect accuracy, right? So to counter that nerf, I've added the large break. This gives us a little bit of range and a lot of accuracy, which is actually very noticeable and brings back that aim cone quite a lot. In fact, I can show it with it off. So if I unequip this mod, our aim cone is already going to be way bigger. As you can see, whenever I shoot, look at how big my aim cone goes. Now, if I put that mod on, it's a little bit harder to see because I've got my crosshair visibility a little bit low. But if I bring that up, it's just in general, you're going to feel a lot more consistent landing your shots, which is the best part about it. That delayed shot thing still happens, by the way. But again, that is why I highly recommend having a mix of range and accuracy. Of course, if you want to max out your DPS, then you could go with the integrated suppressor. Just keep in mind, you probably want to be scoping in a little bit more than over the shoulder aiming, which some people might prefer and might do. But you will, again, notice more damage with this. Range actually does yield pretty big benefits to damage, but also not having that accuracy now is very noticeable. For the precision optic, I run the 6x with range. This is what I've been running pre-Lunar Oracle all the way back since launch. Can't go wrong. And then legendary tactical SR mag, obviously just reload speed is going to be beneficial here. Sniper or bingo reload speed is not the fastest. For ammo, you want to run, I think I have some of it here. Yeah, you want to run smart SR AP ammo in in-game PvP. If you're doing Prisonverse or Evo Core early game, you can just get away with normal tungsten. Honestly, you can just use tungsten ammo most of the time. Bingo does that much damage, you're not really going to notice it. Now for PvE, you do want to run smart SR if you're trying to go for speedrunning. If you're doing general PvE, again, you can also just get away with normal tungsten ammo. Even tungsten SR AP ammo is pretty easy to craft. That's generally what I use most of the time. I've got shitloads of that always crafted. But it's up to you. You can use whatever you want. You know, as long as it's above copper. You can even use steel if you're doing general PvE silo farming. If you're doing like great ones or something, you might want to jump up to steel or AP or tungsten. And if you're doing like a proper war or something where you need to have the best of the best, that's when you run smart AP. So if you're doing a war on Evolution's Cool that has high stakes, or if you're doing a defending like the Radiant one on Prism Cool, that's when you'd probably want to, you know, bust out the legendary ammo, which can actually be pretty easy to craft, especially if you're on a server with a lot of materials being farmed and brought in, especially if there's a lot of vending machines active, then, you know, it might be more worth to go with the smart AP, depending on your server's economy. Jumping onto the WILDFIRE accessories, kind of a little bit different. I go everything ranged on here and a little bit of stability. So I go with the tactical suppressor, which guts our mobility, but we get a lot of range out of this. This makes our DPS very strong on the WILDFIRE, and I'll show in a second on the target dummy. Even though the target dummy is a bad way to reference your damage, by the way, please don't test your builds on a target dummy. They still haven't addressed the bugs with it. So yeah, I'll just go out and actually, you know, duel one of your friends or something in a turn land or whatever. Even not a turn land, maybe just in a GVG zone or something like that to actually get a proper feel for the DPS in your build. Again, tactical suppressor, plus 14 range. We'll lose a lot of mobility instead, but we get a lot of damage in return. On our sight, just legendary compact. A lot of stability back, aim down sight speed, which is nice. Then we run the small infrared indicator. This gives us a lot of stability, and in general just helps a lot with the recoil. Deagle without this actually has a noticeable amount of recoil. You could also, if you want to reduce the spread and over the shoulder aiming, run the integrated laser sight. I don't recommend it. I think stability is way better. And then for the extended pistol mag, obviously legendary, more mag capacity. We do knock off a lot of stability with this, but I think the extra bullets generally help quite a lot. Now again, same rule applies for ammo, same as the bingo. Smart AP ammo if it's a, you know, situation where you need the best of the best. But generally speaking, you can get away with tungsten pistol ammo or just normal tungsten as well. Now I have left a couple things out, more or less the consumables and the deviation I use. So for deviations, for PvE and PvP, you can use the Lone Wolf, which just generally gives you a massive weapon damage bonus by the target that's being attacked. So you can send it to a target that's being attacked, whether that be a great one in PvE or a silo boss or a player or a meta in PvP. This is going to be your best bet for increasing your damage. However, the best of the best for PvP is still the Mini Wonder. I don't think anything, in my opinion, really beats the Mini Wonder of how strong it is. Again, you want to aim for a... I think I have it here. Do I have it here? I might have forgot to bring it in, actually. Ooh. Let me go to a turn line back real quick. So, for the Mini Wonder, here we go. Here's a perfect one. So, Mini Wonder, you want a 1.5. Now, again, this is my favorite PvP deviation, and the reason why is because the lower the skill rating, the smaller the radius of bullets it absorbs. The higher the activity rating, I can't quite remember, I think it was duration. Now, the reason why we want, again, a lower skill rating is because why would we want to increase the radius of our Mini Wonder if it's going to absorb bullets that aren't even going to hit us anyways, right? So there's that sort of, like, why would we make our Mini Wonder run out faster by bullets that wouldn't even hit us in the first place? So that's why we go with a low skill rating, but a high activity rating. Then for traits, I think it was Growing Pains 3 or Worn Out 3. It was one of those two you wanted. I can't remember because I can't actually inspect my deviations in normal. I think you wanted Growing Pains 3, if I was to be mistaken on the traits there. But if you can't get a trait, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have a 1.4 or a 1.5, you're generally going to be a pretty safe bet in PvP. It's going to do you well. It's a pretty OP deviation. You can use Xeno Purify if you like zapping around with your melee weapon. I don't really like it. I think it's very easy to counter. Half the time, Xeno Purify also just bugs out and stands still and does absolutely nothing for you in PvP. Another fantastic option is actually Voodoo Doll in PvP as well. A lot of people have been using that recently, which can be, again, pretty good to shear the damage. Is what it's used for. It's a Voodoo Doll, of course. So, you know, it's basically return to sender, effectively. Which is very strong for the crossbow, actually. Another crossbow buff there, which fucking sucks. Now, for PvE, again, I generally recommend just going with the Lone Wolf, which is what I mostly use for PvE. However, in general PvE, I always find myself using the Jellyman. You can't go wrong with the Jelly. You really can't. It's good for sanity, especially on Lunar Oracle. You're going to find yourself getting rid of that sanity a lot. Can't go wrong with the Festering Gel. Pretty easy to farm them as well. Pretty tedious, though. But yeah, that's what I would recommend for the most part. So, you know, Lone Wolf for PvE and PvP. Mini Wonder if you just want to be an absolute tank. And then, yeah, Gel for general PvE is pretty much the structure I would go with for deviations. Now, Consumables is where things get a little bit more complex. In fact, they get a lot more complex. I also forgot to mention hides, and we will get onto hides as that's a whole nother section as well that they introduced back in Way of Winter. So, for food, the general consensus is for drink iced tea in PvP. So if I find it here, I think I have some in my inventory anyways. You just get roll speed and movement speed after rolling. And if you have the brain freeze, it lasts longer, and I would highly recommend that. Of course, use a dinosaur deviation to craft it. I don't think I did that on my current ones. Yeah, I actually have dinosaur active or dino, but man doesn't like to cook. Anyways, that right there is just going to be very good in PvP for moving around really fast. I've got bonus effects on here. I don't even think this is the dino bonus effect. I think this is just from one of my kitchen buffs, where the dish bonus effect is 10% stronger. So it, again, just buffs that a little bit more. Brain freeze makes it last really long as well, which is quite nice. Now for the general food, I run a sort of canned fruit for the most part because it gives a nice damage increase. But if I need to be a little bit more tanky, if I'm getting a little bit irritated by the critical pulse crossbows, then I'm going to run HP bonus. And that is just the general food here. You can run safety sandwich as well, but there's a reason why I run the canned lunch meat. So not only do I run the canned lunch meat with the bonus effect of max stamina, which if you're curious how to do, you farm rabbit meat and deer meat, and you can eat them both and get a massive stamina increase. So Right now, I've got 25% extra stamina. That comes from 2 pieces of hide armor, which we'll get onto later. But if I consume both of these foods here, one after another, now only one of the core effects is going to go through. So if you're curious, the core effect or the food effect is only going to stack one time. But bonus effects from different kinds of foods can stack as many as there exist, right? So the plus 40 max stamina comes from canned lunch meat with rabbit food. The canned lunch meat plus 25 stamina comes from crafting canned lunch meat with deer meat. So I basically just craft a bulk of that with the long-term shelf life buff, which gives me double, and I've just got a lot of those in the fridge. And again, that gives me another shitload of stamina, basically, so I can roll, you know, at least another, let's see, I think another 3 times on average, yeah. So I can roll another 3 times, basically, without stam draining, which is very nice. And if instead of running the Bastille and you decide to run the Shelter piece for stam reduction, then you could even get another dodge in there if you really wanted to, which is quite OP. Now, we can jump onto pristine meats as well. This is where things get even more complex. So, I've actually only got one on me here, but this is pristine bear meat. And this buff is very good if you're in a very serious situation, whether that be a high stakes war on Evolution's Call or defending the Radiant one. This is where this kind of expensive food comes in. This canned lunch meat bonus effect not only gives me the 10% HP, but it gives me another max HP 15% and dish bonus effect magnitude 20%. So this dish bonus effect magnitude is buffed by or buffs this bit here, the HP bonus, and then I get another 15% on top of that on my HP. So this is going to make you very tanky, and when you might need that, it could be very useful. And this isn't the end of it. This is just the pristine bear meat. Now, if you're wondering how to get pristine bear meat, that comes from farming and taming animals, and then skinning or, you know, killing the animals and getting their meat with, highly recommend using gloves for that, by the way. The yield gloves, I forgot the exact name of them. There was a buff you can get that is going to give you more meats or pristine meat when you kill them. I will link a really good farming and taming video down below, because it is actually like its whole own thing that gets pretty complex. And again, this is, as I've said, is a bonus effect. So this bonus effect here will stack with the bonus effects of both our other canned lunch meat. So our max stamina 40, our max stamina 25, our max HP 15%, our pristine bear meat, that all stacks. And it gets even more complex. We have fine turtle meat. This gives us stamina recovery speed 50%, very strong. You can stack that as well. That's 4 things we can stack. And then we have not in combat. You can recover 3% match. I wouldn't really recommend pristine poultry. It feels like a bit of a useless one. But there is, let's see, there's a bunch of other ones. Actually, pristine pork. That is another option as well if you don't want to run pristine bear meat. It's kind of the same effect as well. And this is one of the ones I'm not sure if it stacks, because there's so much stuff to test with pristine meat that I don't have enough pristine meat to test it. This would have to be something I had to spend a significant amount of time with. And at that point, it becomes like, is it even realistic to get all these buffs in PvP? Probably not. That's why I would highly recommend just sticking to both rabbit, deer, and beer, and that's about it. As generally all these other buffs, it's not realistic to get them all. It's just really not. Especially if you're on Prismverse, where it resets every 19 days. Way too much investment, way too much cost, and is it really going to help you, or can you just outperform without it, kind of thing. So there's kind of a compromise there. If you really want to min-max, then go for it. I just don't think it's worth the time investment. Now, there is another food bonus effect that you can stack on here through the pan-fried fish. The pan-fried fish is the fish dishes that also give bonuses based on the fish you use. The 2 that I would recommend for this build is slightly increases weak spot damage, which is the up here, so the pompano fish. So you got to do a little bit of fishing here as well, but this is much easier to do. And not only that, you can store fish in fish tanks as a way to keep them ready and good to go without them going off. So you can basically keep the fish alive and then kill it when you need it. So yeah, you can do a lot of fishing one day, and then it could be set for a whole season. It's much easier to get, especially these smaller buffs. And you can, again, stack these bonus effects as well. So you can stack this weak spot one, but the more important one here is, I think it should be down here. If I find it soon. Unless they got rid of it. Or no, it's, hang on, it's kind of buggy, I forgot. It's a little bit buggy, like a bunch of them just say plus load, but there's one that gives you plus 5% fire rate, which is the one I would highly recommend. Let me try and find it here. This UI is very buggy, by the way. There we go. So fire rate plus 10%. Sorry, it's plus 10%. And that is the sea bass. The sea bass is very easy to catch. If you go to any sort of lake or any sort of riverbed, you'll, on average, maybe 20% of the time, you'll catch sea bass. And once again, you can store those in a bunch of fish tanks. I've done that in the past. And, you know, get double shelf life as well. Get portable fridge. And you'll never have to worry about farming these again. It's very worth it as well. This is one of those bonus effects that I highly recommend having up most of the time, as you will get significant results using this. Especially if you use precision style on the WILDFIRE. This is a nice way to get back on that fire rate reduction, which is very nice. And this also helps with bulk cancelling on the bingo. Now, here's the part of the video where I want to get onto a bit more of the complex systems behind the build. So, if you're new to Once Human, there is something called bulk cancelling. Now, if you're experienced with Once Human, you can probably ignore this section. This is utilizing a rapid shot style blueprint to do a animation cancel that allows us to shoot faster than we should. Now, at this point, it's pretty much intended because it's been in the game for over half a year. Actually, it's been in the game since, I think, CBT 3 when they introduced calibration blueprints, so make of that what you will. But basically, you can either just spam A and D, or you can simply scope in and out really fast to do the bulk cancel. So here's an example. I'm simply just going to spam A and D and left click really fast. Now, I'm missing here. That is not a good example. But when you get really good at it, you basically just shoot really fast and you animation cancel the bulk. To put it in perspective, this is how fast the sniper usually shoots. Still fast, but pretty slow. But again, mixing in that simple action of AD strafing, if you will, you're going to be very fast and you're going to find it very useful. And when you get the timing down, when you get comfortable with it, it's going to be pretty much by default. You just do it without even realizing. Just becomes a muscle memory kind of thing. The same thing goes for doing it scoped in. You can AD spam while scoped in, or you can scope in and out like this, sort of quick scoping basically, to also do the animation cancels, so like this. And that's just another way of doing it. There are a few other ways, so you can crouch and then spam crouch, and that does the same thing. Basically, just doing a movement action is what resets the bolt faster. So I think you can even, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, you can jump as well. So this is actually a very good one for movement players. So yeah, you can just spam jump and it does the same thing. But there's one of the small technicalities there I want to mention, especially if you're new to the game, as it's a, you know, a little piece of tech that might help you out in PvP, especially if you're PvE speedrunning, it'll help you a lot as well. Now, onto hides. The last thing in this video, we're about to hit an hour long. So, one of the more complex features here is hides. So, we're going to go through the list of our armor here, and I'll showcase the hides I would recommend based on the build. So, for our mask, or our head, we have weak spot damage reduction or status damage reduction. In the current meta, I would generally go with status damage reduction. I can't remember which wall that is. It's one of, there's so many hides, by the way. It's kind of absurd how many hides there are. In fact, I don't really like, I think it's non-weak spot damage reduction for memory. Yeah, so non-weak spot damage reduction wall, and I think you get golden wall. Yeah, so damage reduction fluctuates between 1 and 10% every second. Golden wall is going to be best for a lot of your armor pieces, and this comes from farming as well. and I will link a guide to golden wool farming specifically that explains it much better than I would in a more in-depth, and again, that is its whole own thing as well as hide farming. So there's a lot of in-depth systems that I've added recently that make getting into the game very overwhelming nowadays. If you're an experienced player, you probably already know about the hides, but it is good to re-mention them, especially if you might be unsure or coming back to the game from a long break. Let's say you're like me and you took a break during a wave of winter and you came back in the last couple months. You might be curious what the changes are and such. Jumping onto the top, so we'll jump onto the savior here. Now, I generally just run max underscore SP. This just gives you plus 15% stamina, and all you need is the Wasteland Wolf skin. Now, there are different like things you can get. So you can get, for example, max stamina and sprint speed plus 5%. You could go with either or. I go with max stamina, but you could also go with max stamina Wasteland Wolf skin. It depends on whichever one you get more of. This one's way harder to get, especially if you're on Prison vs Clash. You might not be getting this one all the time. It's a lot rarer, especially for a 19-day scenario. Do you really need it? Or do you compromise and just go with wolf skin, which is much easier to get? So there's a whole system here, and I mean, if you want to min-max, you'll go for Wasteland. If you just have general hide, you just go for the general Wasteland, right? Which is much easier to get, especially around Red Sands. Jumping onto the pants here is the same thing. I just run the wolf skin if you want to min-max, Wasteland wolf skin, and that's pretty much that. Now for the gloves, it really doesn't matter what hide you run at all, as there is no actual PvP or PvE damage related or defensive buffs or anything like that. Gloves are pretty much purely just yield boosts and gathering stuff. So you could honestly just run whatever you want. If you want a little bit more logging, mining, whatever, you know, maybe rabbit meat yield, that could be pretty good. Just wolf skin again, doesn't really matter. You just read through them and see what you might want. But again, you don't need any specific hide for gloves. It doesn't actually matter in my opinion. Now for boots, this is the important one. So you can either, if I find it here, I think this is the golden wool as well. Yep, so this is the most important hide out of all of them in my opinion. This is golden wool on the boots, which fluctuates your roll speed between 10 and 25% every second. This is again one of the most important wools to get for your armor basically, as it's going to make you roll very fast. If you've ever seen PvP highlights recently, this is one of the additions they made in Way of Winter that is making people basically move very fast, and especially in PvP it is very strong. That said, there also is the option of just having straight up movement speed. So I think it's a similar case where it's a fluctuation based system. I can't remember which one it is, but basically you get movement speed under certain circumstances. There's also stamina if you want to go for that. Again, I'd highly recommend golden wool. If you don't have golden wool yet, you can go with normal wool, which is plus 8%. So golden wool is a little bit more in-game focused. So pre-best in slot, you could just go for the, I think it's crocodile. Yeah, you could just go for crocodile, Coastal Bay crocodile skin. That's a little bit easier to get, especially early game. Yeah, so you might want to go for that one, which comes from the southern area. Actually, no, this is golden wool, isn't it? Yeah, so this one would come from farming as well. So that's a bad example. Sorry, it is the crocodile hide, which is plus 8%. This is really good pre-best in slot if you're newer to the game, if you're not too in-depth or far into taming and farming yet, or people aren't selling a lot of golden hide. Generally speaking, if you're on a sweaty PvP server or a sweaty PvE server, a lot of people sell golden wool in their vending machines, so it can actually be a very easy pickup. They sell it quite cheap nowadays too because they've been accumulating so much of it. But if you're on a little bit more of a slow server, a little bit more of a new server, then the pre-business slot option is just general crocodile hide. And a really good spot where I go to farm crocodile hide, or tame crocodiles for that matter, is down south in the Harborside POI, in this sort of sewagey or sewagey area, I guess, swampy area of the town here. There's a lot of crocodiles in the shallow water that you can either tame or kill for hide, depending on if you want to be bothered farming. It's quite a boring aspect of the game. It's not something I'm particularly interested in, but again, a lot of people sell the golden hide these days, so it can be a lot easier to get. Now, I think we've wrapped up most elements of the video. Pretty complex. And to contrast that, I am going to be adding all of this information into a simplified build guide on my website very soon. So if you know me from New World, I have a New World website that has all my New World build guides on it, which makes it easier for quickly referencing something instead of coming back to an hour-long video. But with that said, I will be adding the Once Human section to that website very soon. Over the next week, I plan to add that and publish it, where you'll be able to quickly reference things from my Once Human builds. But until then, I have a oncehumandx.gg link in the description for both the PvE and the PvP build, which is quite a nice website, but it does miss some information such as the hides and the accessories, but that is fine. For the general purposes, the general parts of the build, that is all fully, contained and relevant on that website, and I will leave those links in the description temporarily until I get the build site published for Once Human stuff. Now that's pretty much everything for my updated V7 bingo guide for an hour and 3 minutes. And upcoming, my next build guide is going to be the Silent Anubis, Anubis build, however you say it. That's a pretty fun weapon. I have a lot of fun with that. That said, it is primarily a PvE weapon. And I want to, branch out into a little bit more of the PvE guides, as that's a lot more where the player base is focused nowadays. But whether you're a PvE player or a PvP player, I hope you enjoyed this video and got some new information out of it. Even if you're a long-time player, I hope it helps you maybe a little bit, or, gave you a little bit of an insight into how I do my builds. And again, if you have any feedback, if you have any suggestions, leave them in the description. It always helps to take in feedback on a build or take in new considerations, as, I might not have the perfect solution for everything. But that said, I'm pretty confident with this build that you can compete pretty well with it in PvP and PvE. And for the most part, if you're a new player, I hope I covered everything from the basics right up until the more technical stuff such as hides and food stacking. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscription is much appreciated. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.